Hey Middle-earth role-playing fans and Lord of the Rings fans in general. Welcome back to the channel. I am Romantikill. Today we're going to be looking at the second edition realm book called Arnor. This is 2005 of the series and it was released in 1994. When I first saw it, I went out and bought it. I paid like $50. You can see I have my copy here. It is huge. There are over 400 pages. It came with 8 maps, which we'll see later. And it's just a thick book for Middle-earth role-playing. It's the biggest book they ever came up with. You can see the cover art is by Agnes McBride, and they have used this in Lost Realm of Cardolan. So they're repurposing it, because it is a cool picture. Now this book, you have to be aware, is a second edition book, and they combine a lot of books into this. Almost everything, but not quite. You can, from Ranges of the North, the Lost Realm of Cardolan. There is elements of the Empire of the Witch King involved, but not as much detail. Bree and the Barrow Downs. Again, they don't completely cover the book, but they give a lot of the core essence of these books. Hillman of the Trollshaws, Dark Mage of Rudar. They mention certain place names that are in there, and they put it in a different time frame. Rogues of the Borderland, Thieves of Tharbad is represented. Phantom of the North Marches. Wozes of the Blackwood, not so much as mentioned. Raiders of Cardolan, the same thing, there are a few references. Weathertop, Tower of the Wind also makes an appearance. The only book that doesn't make an appearance at all in any people, places, or things is Trolls of the Misty Mountains. This book is cannot be considered canon for the Middle-earth role-playing world. It is a standalone. The geography of it doesn't make any sense, and the story and the history it represents makes no sense at all. It's too bad they didn't try and fix this book, this module, and try and include at least something of it. Alright, so without further ado, let's go take a closer look at this book. So looking at the cover art by Agnes McBride, this is the coolest cover art I think Middle-earth role-playing ever had. It's definitely one of my favorites, if not the favorite of mine. And I guess they liked it there in Middle-earth role-playing too, because they used it. So this book has over 400 pages, so I'm not going to go through every little detail. You get a table of contents. The credits, as I mentioned previously, this book has Rangers of the North, Lost Realm of Cardolan, Hillman of the Trollshaws, Bree and the Barrow Downs, Thieves of Tharbad, and actually contains elements of a lot of all the other books I mentioned previously, except for Trolls of the Misty Mountains. It gives a little backstory on the one side, a story, guidelines, abbreviations, so nothing definitions, so nothing new in terms of any other campaign book, except for everything is times 7 or 8. Adapting, converting stats, standard game terms. We could go on about this. Then it gives an introduction to Arnor in 1643. Goes through with Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudar. Then it goes through the history from the first age to the second age. It talks about Numenor and Arnor, the downfall, the founding of the realms of exile, the kingdom of Arnor, the dividing kingdoms. I think Middle-earth role-playing did a really good job of explaining why the kingdom was divided and how it was divided. Something that Tolkien doesn't really go into a lot of detail. He just mentions that King Eärendur, after the death of King Eärendur, his realm was split into 3 among his sons. So obviously the sons didn't like each other, and they had certain followings. So next they go into the history of Cardolan under the Arnorian rule, the kingdom of Cardolan, the disaster and civil war, and the rise of the Witch King of Angmar. Rudar, same idea. Talks about its early history, war and plague from 1408 to 1643, the Second Northern War, Arthedain and the petty wars, and Cardolan since the fall of the kingdom. Plague and its aftermath, the North in later times. So we're talking about Arthedain, from basically the Great Plague, 1643, all the way up to its final dissolution in 1974, the Third Age. Yeah, Cardolan, what's left of it, the fall of Arthedain, the flight and death of the last king Arvedui, the independent shire, the settlements, the rangers, the years in the wild. Now, Tolkien doesn't mention any real settlements after the fall of Arthedain, except for Bree and the Shire. I tend to think that there are settlements. Tharbad exists right up until, I think, the 25th century of the Third Age. And it makes sense that there would be smaller communities living along the Gwathlo, as well as a few down by Sarn Ford, and maybe a few more that they don't know about. Tolkien doesn't go into a lot of detail about the depopulation of the area. Merp does go into that. So you got the Rangers, the Years in the Wild, and the Fourth Age. Then he gives, of course, the big timelines. Again, details are very sparse from Tolkien's point of view, and Middle-earth Role-Playing tried to fill in the gaps as best as they could with the limited information they had. Then we talk about the land, geography of Arthedain, geography of Cardolan, geography of Rudar, the flora and fauna of all three, the animals of Eärendur. Then it goes into the creatures of the far north. The Undeeps is a new section that they put out, saying that there are undeep caverns running across mostly the mountainous parts of Rudar and up through the Misty Mountains and out into the plains of the Forwardwaith. I don't know if I go that far, but it's possible because the Balrog hid himself in the Underdeeps. The Banes of Angmar, so from the 1636 to FA 15, Fourth Age. So unnatural methods the Witch King uses to wear down and eventually destroy Arthedain. It might make sense that there would be things like that. The Amok Curse, destroy magic users. The Blood-Eye Rash, which would go against horses. Crop and herb blights. The Hound Fire, which would destroy the wolfhounds that the Arthedain used to track down wargs. The Red Flux, which is a human disease. Stream Fever. Stream Fever sounds more like dysentery. Wood Blights, to infect tree growth. All these are actually plausible because I believe that the Witch King, though Tolkien never exactly expresses this, but Merp does, and so I believe it too, that the Witch King, in order to replenish his Manish troops, would bring in mercenaries from the east. And when they bring in mercenaries from the east, they're bringing in all sorts of new fun stuff. Kind of like the CCP in China did with our pandemic, the CCP virus. Then we go into the Inhabitants of Eärendur, and this is using a 1643 timeline. Yeah, the North Kingdom of Arthedain, the Lost Realm of Cardolan, the Doomed Men of Rudar. Rudour, however you pronounce that. The Arthedain culture, social order, warcraft, appearance, society, religion. Then you get the Dunedain of Cardolan, society, religion. It says the vast majority of Dunedain in Cardolan are mixed. They call them Turgil or Turgil. Then the Dunedain of Rudar, their appearance. There were never more than only a few hundred pure-blooded Dunedain in Rudar. And their society, the Ariadain, or the Ariadain, I can't pronounce. Dark Gandalf can pronounce these so much better than me. They're basically their appearance, society, religion. Some rivermen of the northern waters, the immigrant Northmen, which makes sense if they're warring states, Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudar, even before the arrival of the Witch King, they would have imported mercenaries to help fight their wars. Yeah, Eärendurian commoners, their society, religion, the people of Rudar, who are the Hillmen, and the Hillmen are mentioned by Tolkien himself. The religion, language of them, society, the Rudarum, or the Northern Rudarum, the Southern Rudarum. Merp goes into detail saying how Dunish tribes would have migrated north into these areas or been used as mercenaries, because Dunland would have been a easy source of people. It would have been close and easy to get to. The Befrain, now, who are kind of like Woses. I'm not sure how much Tolkien talked about them. They're mostly in the Rastvorn. And you got the Brelanders, as well as Danish tribesmen. The Lossoth, who are only mentioned during Arvedui's time. Then they got the dangers in the far north. Life in the summertime, common chores, yeah, crime, death, and with the Lossoth. So it talks about Lossoth society. The Clansmen of Saralan. This is a new MERP creation for the fall of one of the baronies of Cardolan, which was in the south, called Mistalande, which is now called Saralan. It's a completely MERP creation, though I don't doubt that there was a city at the base of the Gwathlo flowing into the Great Sea. It makes sense. After all, Laundair was there. Why wouldn't the Dunedain build something further up the river? Other races, of course, dwarves, petty dwarves, elves, with the wandering companies. You have hobbits. Talks about their origins, wandering days, the Shire settlement and appearance. Creatures of Fairy. This is a new thing they put out with the coming of the Valar. So it makes it seem like they are more common than you would think. Though the only one you really meet is Tom Bombadil. And maybe the mountain of Carahydras in Lord of the Rings. Of course, you got creatures of the darkness, orcs, trolls, the undead. Undead being the barrel whites, being the big one, as well as some wraiths, maybe. And of course, the Witch King himself is a wraith. Weaknesses of the undead. Demons and Fiadignir, I can't even pronounce that. So obviously the Balrog is one of them, and then Spirit Banes. Spirit Banes, again, are I don't think they're a Tolkien invention, not listed very often. He does list a few things like that, like mule lips, in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil. So they are using some of the Tolkien references found in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil. Next, power and politics. So the politics of war in Arthedain, the preoccupation of Gondor, because Gondor is in a lot of turmoil with the civil war they had with Castamir the Usurper, and the flight of Gondor's southern fleet and a lot of its aristocracy down to Umbar, the loss of Umbar, and the wars between the Corsairs of Umbar and the Gondor, which had a devastating effect. It goes into how the royal court of Arnor works, the King's Council, others in the royal council, the royal decision-making, the commons and nobility. Now, Merp goes with the idea that 7 is a very powerful number. You have the 7 dwarven tribes. They have 7 great houses in Arthedain. They have 7 great baronies in Cardolan. But there are only 5 in Rhudaur. So politics and power of Cardolan, the princes and lords, and then it goes into the list of those in Cardolan. So the Herdor of Grithlin, Tyrin Gorthai, which is the Barrow-Downs, the Erneldor of Dol Tener, that's a prince. So after the fall of the kingdom, they took on, some of them kept their baronial names, and the others became princes. The Ernelindor of Dol Calantir, the free cantons of Feotar, which sounds like the Swiss, the kingdom of Saralan, the warlord's realm, which is a little troll piece, Tharbad, and you got the factions. The Great Game in 1642, so you have those who are in Minhiriath, with the Her Grithlin, who I mentioned when I did the military campaign. I used the Grithlin. I actually used the Great Game. Mintirineth, and then Tharbad. You got the government of Rhudaur, which isn't much. The languages of Erärendur, social ranks. It gives us social relations in Erärendur. You can go down the list there. Notes on the races, the economy, trade, and commerce. I got to go through this quickly because there's 400 pages of this, and I'm only on page 90. Trade and commerce in the various regions. Obviously, when the kingdoms fall, then trade and commerce also suffers. Goods and services chart, caravans and merchants. So the cost of transporting stuff in Arthedain would be much cheaper than transporting something in Cardolan, or in Rhudaur. prices in currency, currency chart, an exchange chart, institutions, so the Council of Seers in Arthedain, the meaning of the Palantiri, mystical religious orders, which is something a little bit new, fairs and festivals, the autumn fair, the rules of the fair, institutions of Cardolan. You have the guilds in Tharbad. It's one of the things I don't understand about Tolkien. He only mentions the Dunedain of in the Barrowdown region. He doesn't mention anything. He doesn't really go into a lot of detail about Tharbad, other than it was a crossing point and that it finally fell in 2500. It was flooded and was a shadow. By that time it had been a shadow of its former self. So there must have been a big city there. The guilds, all the various guilds, fairs and festivals, evil cults, that's something new. Dark priests of Angmar. Warcraft, my favorite sections. The Arthedain military, the Dagarim Aran, or the Royal Army. Then you have the Dejarim Eärendur, which is the noble armies. Gives a list of their military structure and the military branches. Equipment. So they actually went into more detail. The first Arthedain book, Ranges of the North, did not give a lot of military details. It didn't have anything about the Royal Guard, the Tirim Aran, a Citadel Guard, a Rembar Tirim, because Gondor has that. They have their third company of the tower and all that stuff. Nor did it mention anything about the Etheron Aran or the Etheron Eärendur, the militia. It's got equipment, the armies of Cardolan. I like how it goes and talks about what the army of Cardolan might have looked like prior to, from 861 to 1409. The warrior classes, the raggers, who are pikemen. It's an interesting concept. Cavalry and mounted infantry. So they would have used, mostly they would have used Northman mercenaries, which is not all that far-fetched when you think about things. Mercenaries were well known to be used throughout Europe's wars. You got militia, war bands, tribes and clans, mercenaries, and the mercenary companies. Warcraft and Rudar, the king's forces, the traditional Hillman military practice. Doesn't go into a lot of detail about Rudar's military forces. I think Rudar's location made it more defensible. They didn't need a huge army and did not project power all that far out. The Angmaren threat, the military organization, the Orc host, military equipment, siege equipment, field ballistae, field onagers, the trebuchet, the light attack. Something new, they talk about defense against magic. So things can be blessed, shielded, armored, or warded. That's something new they put in. War rams, fortifications, keep strategy. So the strategy is simply keep pressure on Arthedain at all times. Raids, border skirmishes, and then when he can, major wars. Though major wars will wreck an Angmaren army. Even if it was victorious, it would still be wrecked. And it would take years to replenish. Next, we're going into people of note. So the Lords of Arthedain, the line of Isildur. Now they really expanded this from the last one. And I like that. They give the royal family the 1643 timeline. So Argeleb II, or Argaleb II, is the king. And it talks about his family and connections. They give his stats both in Rolemaster and in Middle-earth role-playing, or Lord of the Rings, which is kind of nice if you don't have the actual rulebook for Middle-earth role-playing, but you have the Rolemaster. I guess that was the idea. Gives all his principal items, the heirlooms, much more detailed than he did in the other book. Crown Prince Arvagil, or Arvagil. He even gives his queen, Lyriel, Queen of Arthedain. So I like that. It's good to be the queen. Prince Menaster, the Arthedain commander of the south. He is mentioned in the Lost Realm of Cardolan, but not in the Rangers of the North. And we got a sister, Princess Nirena, and her family connections. So her husband and sons. The great houses of the Arthedain. Now, in the original Rangers of the North, they don't really they mention the great houses, the 7 great houses, but they never mention who runs them. So this is quite new and quite interesting to read through, and even lists where they live. So, for example, Karamir Glossarn, Erätar Hayar. He lives in Minas Hayar South Tower in the hills southwest of Ninil. the Nuil. Yeah, House Foro, House Noirin, House Tarma. The Tarmas are mentioned in the Rangers of the North book, but not that guy. Finralin, Hiratar Tarma, Halin of Oro, and the Akitas. The Akitas are again mentioned in the Rangers of the North, but not by name. Emery, and then other personalities. So it gives you a couple of other extra guys. You got Baragon Turman, who is a companion to Arvagil, with his sister Bellavana. She's quite the babe. Blanco and Marco Falahide. Escalator Lucerial, who is a spy master. So Lord of Spies with the Prince. That's a pretty cool job. Marl Tarma, who is mentioned in Rangers of the North. The Nuil. So this is the tail. This is one of those fairy creatures they have. She's in the actual lake. Now you get personalities of Cardolin. This one these can be all found in the Lost Realm of Cardolin. So I'm going to go through quickly. You have Eärendur, region of Grithlin, the guy I went after in my military campaign. Findulis of Dol Calantar. So they make it so women can do stuff too. Hallis of Tiner. Imlak the Canatar from Gondor. So he'd be the Gondor military commander in Cardolin, in Tharbad. Because Gondor would have an interest in them. For Gondor, trading in the north, Tharbad is the key place. King Leneg of Saralan. Pelander of Gorthad. Ardager, the warlord, so it gives his backstory. The lesser powers, Beamikind, who is one of the leaders of the free cantons of Theotar. Icorian, the Her of Grithlin, who is the heir. Fioril, the Mactosh of Mactosh, so a clan chief in Saralan. Sounds like Scots. The Scots are Irish. Olby, who's the leader of unrest in Siduri. And then Pelinwin of Gorthad. Cheryl, the Oracle of the Befrayan, who's mentioned in a few books. And then Tharbad, we have Eratel, Chamberlain of the Cenotar. Faradale Tenair. Silmarine the Mage. These are people listed in the Tharbad book. It doesn't mention the mercenary captains. Like, doesn't give their descriptions very well. It only does in the very back in the military tables. So you'd have to go back to the original Lost Realm of Cardolin to find out about them. Leaders of Rudar, King Ermagil, Stonearm of Rudar. So he's like a lesser Dunedain, mixed. Mashbram, Steward of Rudar. These are all new, pretty much. Broga, Targarm of the Hillman. Now he is mentioned in the Hillman of a couple of the books. Elantirio of the Lost, she is new, a woman of Cardolin. And then Els of Erärendur, you have Elindiel of Siragal, that's totally new character. So she's supposed to rule what elven community still exists between Arthedain and Linden. There's a small community of elves living just west of the Shire, towards the Tower Hills. And then you have one of the guardians, Endovan Pastel of Harlithian, who keeps the path open for wandering companies. Personalities in other ages, so obviously you have Elendil the Tall. You have Gilgalad, Third Age personalities. Arvaleg the First, Malborn Elon, the Tainted Seer, who's in the Arthedain book. Arvedui, the last king of Arthedain. Malbeth, the High Seer of Arthedain. Erenarth, who is the first chieftain and of the Dunedain of the North, and he was the crown prince of Arthedain at one time. Book of the Marish goes down into the marshlands next to the Barandun, and that is the eastern border of the Shire until the Bucklanders come. You got Aragorn II, Paladin, Pippin's dad, the 31st Thane of the Shire. This is quite the long book. And Traveler's Guide. Now this is interesting. You got all the Traveler's Guide stuff, and it goes alphabetically. I cannot go through all of this, but it is very interesting reading through. Some of the descriptions are obviously more detailed than others. Like Bree and Breeland are going to have a lot. So this is still Bree, still in Bree, Sometimes it'll mention the people in Bree. So this is basically Bree in the Barrowdowns book. Right here in one section. Kameth Bryn, or Kameth Bryn, which I liked. This one can be found in Hillman of the Trollshaws. Caris Alernin, or Caris Calernin. That can be found in Rogues of the Borderlands. Dol Calentor, Dol Tener. So it does mention more communities within. So Andrath, Arnak, Dinak are villages found within Dol Tenar. Dunland and the Inethwith. Trying to work on my pronunciations. The Enengladel, which is the angle, which is Uliel, Erluin, Eridoriath, Erigian, or Erigian, Erinvorn, yep. Fornos Urain. We gotta throw all this stuff. Grithlin, Linden, Mitraith, which is Middle Earth role playing, puts Mitraith as the capital of Cardolan. That never really becomes a true capital. Got the Misty Mountains, Midgewater Marshes, Moria, the North Downs, Numeridor, the Oyolad, which is the Endless Plain, the Old Forest, the Rast Forn, Pinithcerin, or Pinithcarin, which is right south of the Old Forest, east of the Shire on the Barrenduin side, near the Sarden Fords. Rudour, its main places. And they list all of them. Harubar Gular is that ruined keep that you play in the very first adventure when you have the rule books. So I quite like these. Very interesting reading all this. Rivendell, Sarn Ford, Saraland there, Shire. The Shire has a lot to go through. Sirigal, Siduri, Thalion, Tharbad. Doesn't go into Tharbad as much as I would have liked. The Tower Hills, the Trollshaws, Tyrion Gorthad, the Udinoriath, Weathertop. It doesn't really go into a lot of details about Amon Sul itself, but it talks about the area around it. Like the Fief of Oyamiril. Cities and towns, Anunimus. So it gives a brief description of Anunimus. Kameth Bryn, the same thing. Fornos Urain, Mitraith. So reading through this, there's also new material they added in. So they expanded the whole idea of Mitraith and the Royal Palace, which was here. And that's a nice little map of Mitraith. Before, it was really small. The village of Rude, which can be found in the Arth Ranges of the North. Siduri, which is found in the Lost Realm of Cardolan. Tharbad, again, it gives brief descriptions. It has the Ossinan Tarambar with a fortress there. Then you go into castles. These, the Argon, found in Lost Realm. Barrett Grithlin, another one. Thalion the Palace. It expanded the palace. Made it more interesting to go into. Gave it more rooms in a dungeon, which was more interesting. Sites of interest, the Barrowdowns. It gives the nature, all that fun stuff. It doesn't give as many barrows as the Bree and the Barrowdowns does, so I would recommend using Bree and the Barrowdowns as a supplement, because this just doesn't have enough of the tombs. But it does okay. Then it has Lawn Der Eneth, which is Vinyalande, and then Lawn Dar itself, and the ruins of both sides. And they actually did more with the ruins. And they have some kind of... They added new characters to it. New locations. Now we have Kreb Durga, the Orc Caves of Kreb Durga. They really expanded those. Before they just had some basic caves. Now they have a whole cave complex. And they made it into a really major player. That was the old one with that one, but then they expanded it into underground caverns. More of the old ones. Malborn, the High Seers Observatory. That can be found in Ranges of the North. The Royal Library of Anunimus, again, same idea. It's in the Ranges of the North. Dongoris Hold is also found there. Items of power, so it gives some Anduro, the Flame of the West. The Star of Solitude, the Ellenris. Goods of the High Chief in Rudour. Glamdring, the Fullhammer. Heirlooms of the North Kingdom. Narsil, Narya. The Ring, Orcris, the Palantiri. The Rune Knife of Rizeneth. which is Losadan. The Thanes Mathams, and Vilya, the Ring of Air, which Elrond has. All right, no, a lot of stuff. Then we go with the Adventures, a frontier fight, which is found in the Arthedain book, which is good. It's a good way to spark a war with Angmar or Arthedain, depending which way you go. The Mithril Room, found in the Lost Realm of Cardolin, was a good adventure to play. Now they've added more to it, and they have a Tale of the Enemy. They go into a lot of details on this one. A Blow for Peace, which is a tale of treachery between Gondor and Kalantar, anti-Gondorian factions. Treachery, this is the one that if you do this, then you can play a military campaign where you restore Eärendur to his ancestral home of Garithlin, overthrow his uncle. That's the one we do. The Purging of Rude, not much to do there. This is a very brand new adventure, The Fate of the Kings, so the high banners of the high kings. The idea is pretty dumb, but to do it is actually good, pretty interesting. All the places. So it gives the tale, the party, a whole bunch of people. The banners, which are heraldic symbols and colors of Elendil, Gil-galad, and Eldarion, the Numenorean prince who first promoted the alliance. Eärendur in 3430. It has Werewind, so Sauron trying to stir up trouble. That's a Merc creation. I don't think that ever happened. That Sauron had the ability to project power that far north, especially when he was at war with Gondor and trying to wipe out Gondor before Arnor could come to their aid. I do like the map key it gives, because it mentions some places. That's the problem. Tolkien didn't mention enough places in his compendium. Tolkien was more interested in his magnum opus, which turned out to be the Silmarillion, than going into a lot of detail about the history of Arnor, which is maddening. Very maddening. Terror Among the Tombs, which can be found in the Arthedain book. Hunt for the Warlord. This is another one. They've expanded this one, which I like. So it becomes a major thing. There's forces from Arthedain, the mercenary companies, Tarin, Dol Tanar has got his forces there. There's some Kalantar forces, and a campaign of the Lords Allied. And it gives a couple of areas. So more places, so to speak, and a map of what the surrounding region looks like. Intrigue in Fornos is the Tarma and Akitas scheming. You have the Rangers of the North section and what they do. Creating a Ranger character, life and duties of the Rangers. Missions under protection. Chieftains of Rangers, so they give a nice, all the Rangers up until Aragorn II. Now, my favorite part, the Master Military Table. Same Dagorem Aran, the Royal Army is the same, nothing new, it's very small. You can find out what the size of the Dagorem Aran was in the Arnorian period by reading through it and reading the Tower of the Wind, the Amansul book. They added the Rembar Turin, the Citadel Guard, which is pretty cool. Because I always found that the Dagorem Aran was too small in the original books. The Dagorem Eärendur and the Etheron Aram. This is something they never mentioned either. How many militia they had. 10,000 rural militia and 4,000 militia sitting in Fornost. In and around Fornost, which makes sense. Then you have the Turim Aran, the company of the Royal Guard. The Royal Rangers. Now they do give the Hound Dogs. And that makes perfect sense too for hunting out wolves, wargs, and finding out where orcs are. You'd want that. It gives the Breland garrison. And says that Breland has 1,000 militia with 500 hobbits. The muster of the Siragali or the Saranar, the elves, which is quite small. The Dagorem, Aran, and Eäxaran. So it says there's militia there. 2,000 men and 3,000 hobbits living around Sarn Ford. Then it talks about the Witch King, so his forces. The Empire of the Witch King book module will give more details. The Uruk Angmar, so the two main military forces. The Rudarim forces of Rudar, these can be found in the Hillman of the Trollshaws, which I quite like. It's quite different war bands, the King's Band. And it gives the Guardians of Rivendell, the Host of Linden, the Dwarven military forces. You can use the Moria book for a bigger one, but you can use this for the Blue Mountains dwarves. And then the Royal Sovereign Forces in Cardolan. Nothing new. They're all found in the Lost Realm of Cardolan book. Belfran in the Rastvorn. The mercenary companies. So there's still the 4 main mercenary companies, and then other brigands and mercenary companies. The Lost. They give some Second Age forces now, which is kind of nice. Again, that's a Merp creation. Fourth Age, Rangers of the North, Hobbits of the Shire, and then you go into the Master NPC table. This is just a quick, nothing really new there. The mercenary captains are mentioned. There'll be a couple of new people in there. Like you can get Saruman, the Many-Colored Sharky, Tom Bombadil, and then the Traveler's Guide, everyone you're going to meet in the Traveler's Guide. And then the people in the Adventures, Master Beast table, Encounter table. So this is quite... So you have one for Arthedain and Rudar, and then one for Cardolan. Weather tables. The appendices. So you have the High Kings of Arnor, Kings of Gondor, how they split, then the Kings divisions. I like how Merp created a line of kings for Cardolan and Rudar, because Tolkien never did that. He just went down Arthedain, and he left out Cardolan and Rudar, which just was maddening. The appendices, herbs, curatives, poisons, beasts, reptiles, maps. So the Shire map and an Arthedain map. So you go here, and you can see how things changed. And there's the Arthedain map, and there's the Shire map, and another Shire map, and then finally a price guide. Now the other thing this had was a lot of maps. Now they gave 8 maps, and but they don't connect very well. I've tried connecting these before. They do not connect, unfortunately. I don't think this table has enough room for this. Yeah, it's really hard. Like there's really hard to connect these maps. Very hard. I need to be on the floor for this, but they do have the maps that were pretty big, and this was one of my favorite things. These maps I haven't done anything with. They don't connect well. These are actually smaller than the other maps I have. And this one's an off color from the other ones. It has the Numeriador, and you flip it over, and then it has the Tharbad map. The other two have nothing on the back other than a brief description. Same problem as before. There is a gap, and for some reason they overlap each other, which is just maddening as hell. Instead of being nice and crisp all throughout, they didn't do a very good job making these maps connect. That's why they came up with a map set, I think. So there are 7 big maps, and then they had this weird one with these two actually connected like this, and you have to separate them. On the back you have the Rudar parts. This one gives you Amon Sul and Fornost. This one gives you a typical Arthedain tower and a Dunish hill fort in a Rivermen camp. They would have been better as individual things. This one's blank, and this one's blank. It would have been better if they made this on the back of this bigger, and this on the back of this bigger, as well as one of these on the backs. It's just the way they did the maps. It's cool, but it's not. They could have did a much better job, and they do eventually. All right, so that was a quick look at that of Arnor, the realm. I really like how they decided to go with the realm and they combined everything into one book. It does make it very big and expensive. I think that's the downfall of doing it like this. It was very expensive. $50 plus taxes back in 1994 was pretty expensive. Today something like this would probably be $100. If you look online for this book. Now, spoiler alert, they do go back and break this book into 2. But I like the fact they've designated this as a realm book. I think it would have been better if they'd gone and did separate books for each region. So you'd have the Arthedain book, which would also include Bree and the Barrow Downs, Amon Sul, and Rogues of the Borderland. Then the next one would be Cardolan. So you'd have Lost Realm of Cardolan, Thieves of Tharbad, Raiders of Cardolan, and Woes of the Blackwood, all in that module. And then do a Rudar module that had Hillman of the Trollshaws, Phantom of the North Marches, Dark Mage of Rudar. That would have been really cool. I would also like to see the military tables give different timelines as well. They should have had a 861 military table to find out how big the armies were back then, and then go like say 1100, 1300, 1409, the 1642, and then 1700, 1800, and that'd be the last one. But I thought this was a great book. Took it with me to Korea, so I'd have something to do. Had a lot of time on my hands in Korea, so it was good to have this book. I read it so much, and eventually got students of mine playing this game. But anyway, all you Middle-earth role-playing fans out there, let me know if you guys had this module, and what were your thoughts. Leave comments in the comment section, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel. Until next time, I am Romantical. I am out of here.